So today I'll try and review the new Iiyama curved, 1500 curved, 144 hertz, 34-inch panel. I'm by no means a professional YouTube reviewer. This is just a video to kind of help people decide whether they want to buy this panel or not. So just bear that in mind when I go through the review. And having said that, let's get into it. So the first aspect of this monitor is talking about the build in the screen itself. So in terms of the assembly, you had the three pieces included in the box. You had the screen, you had the stand base, and then the stand neck. And assembly was actually really straightforward. It had one included screw and an included mini screwdriver. And I just dropped the neck onto the base, and then I tightened up one screw in the middle there. The first negative thing that I would say about this monitor is the base itself is a little bit too big. It takes up a huge amount of space on the desk. It's probably okay for me because I don't plan on using the base anyway. I'm planning on VESA mounting it. And speak of which, on the back you've got VESA 100 by 100 possible inclusion. So there isn't any adapter or anything. You can just use the included screws. And while we're on the back of the screen, you can see it's got a nice professional look to it. It's not too gamery or anything. Nice and simple, and air vents included at the top. In terms of the mechanics of the monitor, you have height adjustment, so it goes up to 110 millimeters, and then you've also got tilt functionality as well. We don't have swivel on this monitor, unfortunately, but if you're planning on VESA mounting it as I am, that shouldn't be a problem. From the front of the screen, this is a 34-inch monitor. It is 1500 R curvature. There aren't that many panels out there with this type of curvature yet, and obviously Samsung has only just recently released the 1000 R curvature. I really like it. I know some people complain about not liking the curve and would prefer flat panels. Iiyama do have an IPS straight flat screen if you prefer that instead, but I personally prefer it because if you're sat in the middle of the screen, you don't have to tilt your head too far at an angle to see what is happening on each of the sides of the screen. And then the other aspect to this is that the bezels on this monitor are really great. Like it is really thin bezels apart from the bottom, but that's probably a good thing. And the build quality is really great. It is quite a solid unit. There isn't any creaking or anything like that. So it's a really good design, good build. So moving on to the connections that were included in the box. It was actually quite a generous selection. So you have the two adapters, one for UK, one for EU, and then you had DisplayPort, HDMI, and USB as well. This is the look of the box. Moving on to possibly the weakest aspect of this monitor, and it is the speakers. So the speakers have two 3-watt speakers, and they are very weak, very tinny. Even at volume, even at 100% volume, you can still barely hear them. So it's just a sample. I mean, that is at 100%. But then again, for most people, this probably won't be a problem because you already have external speakers anyway. I don't think anybody buys a monitor with the intention of using the speakers. In terms of the monitor controls, this is probably the first Iiyama monitor I've come across that has a joystick. It's not the best joystick in the world, so I've used Samsung's panels and it was definitely way better. It's very clunky. and it's a little bit fiddly too. So in terms of just to go quickly through the options included, the first one is that you get the contrast, eco, advanced contrast, overdrive, MBR, black tuner, color saturation and gamma. Then you get color settings, image adjust. The sharpness was actually really tricky to get right because if you over sharpen it, sometimes the text has this weird blurriness when you're scrolling. So I just left it at 3, and then the option to turn on FreeSync is there as well. Then you've got OSD, which I never use, language, miscellaneous. You can turn off the logo, but it gives you handy information as well, some handy information about the refresh rate and the resolution. Input settings, audio. This is where I just turn off. Luckily, you can turn off the speakers on this panel just through the joystick. And then you can actually save your user settings, which is quite useful. So quite a decent selection of things, and the joystick isn't bad. I definitely still prefer it to the buttons, but it's just not as good. It's not as easy to use. I do like that it is blue colored, and then when you turn off the panel, press and hold, then that sometimes, if it's in standby, that turns to red, and then it's just press and hold again to turn back on. It takes a little while for this monitor to come off and on, and sometimes it doesn't even work. There we go. So in terms of the gaming aspect of this panel, this is a 144Hz refresh rate, which is great to find on this kind of size of panel. Most of them are either 100Hz or 120. It is 1 millisecond response time, which is also really great. Most monitors of that caliber kind of tend to be TN panels, so for 1 millisecond input, that is really good. And then the last thing is that this is a FreeSync panel, so you will get the most out of it with an AMD card. However, saying that, I have a GTX 1070 in my computer and it seems to run fine. The only thing is that turning on adaptive sync does not work very well. You will get constant white flickering, which will get on your nerves after a while. So I just tend to switch off the FreeSync and just use the high refresh rate. I guess that might be something to bear in mind if you're aiming for buying a 3000 card series with this monitor, or waiting to see what AMD have in terms of big navi, so that you can take advantage of syncing with this monitor. In terms of the display itself, we are looking here at a VA panel. The resolution is 3440 by 1440, and it is 400 nits of brightness, which is plenty bright, to be honest. And it includes HDR 400, which I actually think is a little bit of a marketing gimmick. I didn't really see that much of a difference when I switched it on. In fact, in some cases, the color was better off without it. So I just keep that thing switched off permanently. The static contrast ratio is 3000 to 1, which is also really good. In terms of colors, I don't have a color calibration tool, so I can't really perform accurate measures. But the best settings that I managed to get out of this monitor were 60 contrast, black tuner -1, and color saturation on 7, with a gamma of 2.2. The color uniformity on this monitor is not great. It might be difficult to show this on camera, but on VS Code, for example, when you open it, you notice that the top section is darker than the bottom section of the screen. It is definitely more obvious with sort of darker blue colors. And then the final thing, which is probably the biggest off-putting thing about this monitor, is the coating that was used on the screen itself. So it is a really intense coating, like a matte coating, and it's definitely more obvious on the top part of the screen, especially on the sort of blue color. It just looks really, you can see lines, horizontal and vertical lines going across, which is really off-putting. I've tried a Samsung 34-inch monitor before and it was definitely not this bad. It was very clear, the other one. This is it's quite bad. I mean, I think this monitor would be perfect if it wasn't for that major flaw. So yeah, it is. I kind of thought after maybe a week or two of using this monitor, it would be easier to live with, or you just wouldn't notice it. But you can't get around that. Every time you look at it, you see it. If you are planning on using this monitor to watch movies, and you're definitely not going to be disappointed. The colors, the brightness, the blacklight levels are just truly fantastic, and there is I haven't experienced any backlight bleed on this monitor whatsoever. It makes with the curvature for a really immersive experience, and I could say the same about games as well, to be honest. Unfortunately, on my panel, I have a few dead pixels on the bottom right hand side of the panel, which kind of takes away a little bit from the black cutscenes. But otherwise, if it wasn't for that, it is really great for entertainment purposes. So if I was to talk about pros and cons of this monitor, start with the negatives, I would say obviously, first of all, I've had a few dead pixels on the monitor, not great. The matte coating on the screen, I think, is a bit too intense, and it takes away a little bit from the contrast and the colors of the screen, which is a shame. The speakers are not that great, but who really cares? The color uniformity is, it's not great, but it is a VA panel, so it's kind of expected in a lot of these panels for the uniformity not to be that good, or the viewing angles. HDR is pretty much useless, so if you're planning on buying this monitor for HDR, don't expect anything fantastic out of it. Definitely the base is too big. It's far too big. I would recommend the Visa mount if you were going to buy this monitor. The plus sides, obviously you get 144 Hz refresh rate and 1 millisecond response time for gamers. The resolution 3440 by 1440, which now with the new 3000 GeForce series will definitely get you a playable frame rate. I mean, I'm on a 1070, and with this monitor, I was barely getting 30 to 40 frames per second. So the new GPUs coming soon will definitely make a difference. And the other thing is, if you are planning on, I haven't tested this monitor with FreeSync with AMD cards, so I don't know if that flicker exists with this monitor or not. I've heard some reports of people having flicker issues, and they needed to resend the panel back to get it repaired, but I can't test that, unfortunately. I do know that if I try this with G-Sync and with compatibility mode on, it flickers like mad. There's so much white flickering. I guess the best part of this monitor is the price. So you're looking at £430 for this monitor, which, to be honest, considering all the features, is a steal. But it's up to you whether the negatives that I've mentioned outweigh the pluses. Yeah, so that is my sort of first crappy review of monitor of a monitor. If you have any questions, just drop us a message and I'll try and help while I still have this monitor.